Hello, my name is Anthony McClain, and this is The Solution. On today's episode, we discuss our relationships with self-love and self-hate, where they originate, how they affect the way we see ourselves, how they affect the way we see each other, and more importantly, how they affect the way we perceive our future. Today's guests are Nick Hallman, motivational speaker, educator, and also fellow executive producer of the show. We also have Dr. Candace Norcott, licensed clinical psychologist, and Abby Aladakum, attorney at law. So given that the topic is self-love and self-hate, I think it would be important to kind of frame our individual relationships with said feelings. I'd like for you to start first, Nick.
Yeah. I feel like I've had a complicated relationship with it. I feel early on in life, I learned to kind of hate the things I should love about myself, just because the environment I was in didn't understand and fully appreciate who I was. But then as I grew, I started to love things that I probably maybe should have hated. So more the part of me that tried to assimilate or fit in or mute myself. I loved those characteristics and kind of celebrated those things as if I was kind of accomplishing or achieving something, but really I was just changing who I was. But I think now I'm in a space of truly learning to love naturally who I am, because I think I'm around people who can also love me as well. So I think self-love increases when you're around people that can love you.
That's solid.
Yeah, the importance of having people around you and who you keep around you. I think the way that I think about it is really shaped by what I do. So, you know, there's something to be said for if you're encouraging people to feel a certain way about themselves and walk a certain path, you know, it encourages you to do the same thing.
Yeah, I feel like that as well.
And so I see it as kind of like a spectrum, or just like a way I face, and trying to just stay attuned to facing in the direction of having positive people around me, feeling positive. But, you know, we all get switched around at different times, and just staying self-aware enough to always be facing in the direction that I want to go. So
That's good.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think self-love for me is very similar to what Nick was talking about, just being centered and just having a knowledge of who you are, and actually genuinely liking both the good and bad about myself. I think sometimes when we think about self-love, it's only the positive, but sometimes the negative is also something that we can love, in the sense I'm aware of the things I need to change, right? Like, there are things about myself that I'm like, girl, not okay. But I'm glad that I'm honest with myself, and honesty is a trait that I think all of us really need if we really want to be a person that actually loves ourselves.
In all three of your responses, it's clear that there's been a maturation. It's clear that there's been an internal conversation that's allowed you guys to get to the point where you're at. And similarly, I feel the exact same way. I feel like maybe, especially in my teenage years, I felt like I was more so figuring myself out. College, more or less right about the same. I started to realize the things that like I could stop tolerating.
can I add one thing too? Because I feel like you have to have an intentional conversation with yourself, because there's so much subconscious information that's coming at you all the time.
Yes,
So, you know, so the awareness and the intention is a must, because the messages that you're getting, you're being inundated constantly with messages that aren't healthy.
It's impossible to get to a place of healthy self-love without having that conversation, because if you aren't talking to yourself, the world you're in is, and everyone around you is. So you are hearing things, you're being spoken to, but if you aren't talking to yourself and processing those things, then sometimes you just kind of define yourself through that lens. And like, I think the whole like having that moment of realizing, okay, these are things I can and cannot tolerate, either about myself or just aspects. Like, I think that's such a beautiful day. It's a very difficult day, but it's amazing because you do see an evolution, like you were saying, of yourself when you get to that point.
It's so liberating to be able to be like, no. Like, instead of, I think, especially when you're in the journey of self-love, there's so many things that you're kind of like hemming and hawing, like, well, like they didn't mean it like that, or like, you know, well, is that really what I meant to think? There's a lot of self-doubt, there's a lot of critical analysis that honestly you don't really need to go through. Like, some things, especially in the self-love journey, are yes or no, right?
Facts.
This person,
I mean, hard nose.
yeah, like this person actually doesn't need to be in my life. Like,
Yes.
I don't need to make excuses for how this person makes me feel. Or, you know, this imagery, as Candace was saying, about like if it's beauty or whatever, like we take so much in, and if you're not saying like, actually, that's not the only lens in which beauty can be seen, or this isn't the standard of beauty, that's not the end all be all. If you aren't having those conversations and saying, no, I reject that, you're just gonna take so much in that you will lose yourself, like you said,
Facts.
in these messages that are completely manufactured and not at all indication of your worthiness or value.
Wow.
Something that I definitely want to piggyback on in your introduction, I thought that was really powerful, was I'm fully aware that there's things that I need to work on. That said, I still love myself. I think that language and that intention is something that is underappreciated. I think outside looking in, this is my assumption, people whom of which struggle with self-love think people who have self-love think that they're perfect or think that they're not working on things.
Yeah.
And that's not it.
Absolutely.
That's you know, that's totally not it. That perspective and that intentionality behind the way I see myself, the way I celebrate myself, the way I make myself better is something that I think is overlooked and not talked about enough. I think far too often we ask people to reach, but when some people reach, they get really uncomfortable. They get really unhappy. They get really toxic. And there's a way in which we can ask people to do things or talk about progress that's a bit more detailed.
Which is true, because there is this fine line between loving the negative things about yourself and just starting to accept them and not work on them. Right. And so you're saying like, so,
wait, this is huge.
It's like,
this is huge.
It's like a real, it's like, and I mean, we kind of talk about this and we don't like, you know, throw any shade to any sort of like motivational speaker or anything like that. But sometimes there is the thing where it's like, you know, the people on your job that hate you, it's them, they're haters, it's not you. It's like, no, you show up 20 minutes late every day.
Right. But real talk,
you don't work, like you steal people's lunches.
Real talk.
Like it's like, it's you, like you need to work on some things. So I do think we have to get to a place of loving negative things about ourselves, but also going, okay, like let's improve, let's evolve, let's go on this journey, like let's actually get better too.
With self-love, it's really about giving yourself grace to be like, yes, there are things I don't like about myself, but I'm still okay. Like the world hasn't fallen in, I'm still a good person, I'm still like understanding the root of who you are and your intentions. Sometimes you're gonna hurt somebody, you're gonna like, accidentally insult someone or hurt their feelings, but one, you can acknowledge that you've done wrong, but also realize I'm still a good person. Like that action doesn't necessarily define me as a quote unquote bad person. It's not always, it's really not good or bad either. There's gray. And so, for me, I've learned, I think with self-love and especially it's giving myself grace, giving myself not an outlet, but like giving myself space to be like, okay, area for improvement, but we've made some progress at the same time.
And so what you're saying too, or what I'm hearing and what you're saying is stepping out of the dichotomy is really helpful. And I find that really true. Like, oftentimes when I'm talking to people, it's like, well, what's not working for you? Like, what brings you here? Like, what's the thing about your life that's not working anymore? And then let's explore the things that you're bringing to the table, the things that you can adjust. And so for some people, it's working very well to show up 20 minutes late and, have everybody else take over. And they don't see that as a negative point. And it's really hard to say. And so like, what's their journey or progress going to be? They have to decide that. But for other people, it's like, I want to get something in my life that's not here, or I want to shore up some area of my life and I'm not sure why it's not happening. I'm not sure why it's not, existing or coming to fruition. And then you can start to have those conversations. But sometimes without that disruption or without that rift or agitation, it's really hard. From that comes growth, right? Like tectonic plates and all that.
But legit. I feel like we're almost making it sound a bit too easy. I just feel like everybody knows the lip service. Like how can we, like there's because the thing that's interesting, and I find myself, and maybe I did I find myself in rooms often, given what it is that I do, of people whom of which lack purpose, lack definition, yet they have the resources, they have the connections, but they spend so much time taking in what society tells them that they need to be. That they have no clue who they are.
I think for me, one issue that I kind of run into with some of my friends, people that might meet me, I think people think I really have it together, because I'm an attorney or whatever. I think society labels certain careers as like you're really like you're on it and you got it like you're a trailblazer. And it's like, no, I'm still a mess, man. Like, I'm still like, I go to therapy on Wednesdays, 6 o'clock, got an appointment. And some days it's great, and other days it's like, I have made no progress whatsoever. I'm still doing the same things I was doing, a couple months ago. And I think it's just really just kind of taking off the Band-Aid and just being really authentic and real about how messy self-love is. It's not neat.
Yes.
And nor does it ever get easier. It's just like a new challenge, and how you respond to
Agreed.
that is really important.
I think back to when growing up, I was the only person who looked like me in my neighborhood,
Yeah.
in my classes. And then it's like you start to excel in school and you get put in the advanced classes and you're the only one there. And then you get put in the even more advanced classes and you're definitely the only one there. And it's awkward and all these different things. And so I got to a point where the things that I did love about myself were the things that I probably shouldn't have been in love with, because for me it was like, oh, it's such a compliment for someone to tell me that I'm, that, oh, like, you're one of the good ones. Oh my gosh, thank you so much.
Yes.
You're like, you're not like the other. Yeah.
You aren't like the others, or hey, normally I wouldn't let my daughter date, but you're a really great, like, I didn't know there was black guys like you. So like, for me, those are things that I feel, oh man, this is awesome. This is what we're supposed to strive for. What we're supposed to achieve for is this acceptance amongst maybe a world that doesn't really understand us. But as long as we assimilate and we tweak who we are and we fit in, then it's like I mean, how many folks do you know are like, man, you know what? I can get in a corporate room and they respect me right away. And it's like this badge of honor. But what are you actually saying? You're actually saying, hey, if I get around people that don't understand me, I can pretend to be someone else, and I'm so okay with turning off who I am that I'd rather be respected for who I'm not than to be loved and celebrated for who I am. And that's like the messy, nasty part of it.
I just, as you were talking, that's such a visceral and painful memory that I think a lot of Black adults have, and that we carry with us, and that I think impacts how we relate to other people and how we relate to ourselves and in our relationships, and it's just important. And it's important, and then we talk about being aware. We have to come to terms with that as a trauma, right? And just like be kind and give grace to ourselves as children, that we were children and we couldn't have known that that's what adults were telling us and doing. I don't know that. So there's a healing in there that I think is important. It's not necessarily on topic in terms of self-love, but it's a self-healing. That's got to happen.
But you know what? Maybe it is.
I
think the nuances. I think the nuances, especially
real talk.
I think that's the key right there. But no, that's 100% it. It's one of those things where, especially because we navigate spaces that are full of people that don't always look like us, we've just become so good at code switching. We've just become so good at, like, when it is time for us to be fully Black and just love all up on us, we can do that. So it's not necessarily that we make it look easy. It's just that we're professionals. It's just that we're really, really good at playing both sides of the fence.
All knowing have a PhD in code switching.
We give all of these messages that we have to conform to be seen as. And then there's the reality of like who holds the power and is making decisions. But we have to step outside of that paradigm at some point.
Yes.
Very true.
It's not doing us any service, and it's feeding into that trauma of, you're the good one.
I'm the bad one.
You're the acceptable one, and then the fact that we had to swallow that. It's just. And it just layers on top, and we need to step outside of it.
And the goalpost is always going to move, right? So like once you think you've gotten to a place where it's like, oh, I'm accepted, I've assimilated, they're going to find some reason, namely your skin tone, to like move it again and say, actually, I mean, in my career, I've definitely had situations where it's like, well, does she really have like the business skills or things of that nature to become X? Or especially as Black women, I can be direct and I'm seen as yelling.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I'm not yelling.
Yes.
I'm
Why are you
actually
yelling?
not mad.
Yes.
I'm really just.
This is how I communicate.
Right, I'm diagnosing you. I'm providing a solution.
The other thing that I wanted to say that I think we've all been touching on is just the progress towards this space of acceptance it requires you to go through so much discomfort.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it looks ugly and it feels ugly, and some people don't want to do it. And in some respects we may or may not, but we probably have the tools to tolerate that. but a lot of people don't.
No.
And so I think in understanding why people struggle or why we at different points of our lives may have struggled is because we didn't have what we needed to tolerate looking really at difficult or painful parts of ourselves that needed to be healed in order to kind of move forward. You know, that changes on the
I
day.
think that is such a good point, and especially when it comes just to like blackness in general. I think like when we talk about like self-love and being black, sometimes I think there is this temptation to believe that everyone here loves being black. There's no like, you know, I don't want to be black or have some type of like sunken place, you know, get out.
Facts.
But I would be remiss not to say that because we live in a society that oftentimes tells you that black people are this or like black beauty is not this, we've all, or I'm going to talk about myself, definitely have had moments where I've questioned like my looks, how I talk, or like how my blackness looks. And so I think it goes back to what Candace was saying about how you have to kind of admit those things in order to get to a place where you're immovable in your identity and who you are as a black person. You have to admit this moments where you kind of bought into that negative narrative that didn't serve you, made you make some really dumb decisions, you know, whether it was makeup, you know, no sis, that's not your shade. That's not it. Or, you know, you did that hairstyle, like we could talk about perms and like whether or not, you know, all that stuff.
Blue contacts.
Listen.
Blue contacts.
I'm not trying to
say blue contacts.
Going back to like the, you know, the messy and like the internalized things, you kind of have to just like really dig up and be honest, right?
True.
Like it's not this linear thing like every single person and every black person, because we live in a society that tells us that black isn't beautiful. I mean, it may be marketable, but it's not necessarily
blue.
It's not necessarily like I don't think many people in those positions think it's beautiful. We have to admit that there have been times, at least once, where you bought into something that just wasn't true.
Like I remember when Philando Castile and Alton Stirling, it happened like back, like they came out within like a 24-hour span. And I remember I was really grieving over Alton Stirling, and I'm teaching class, and I had come out of class really just like distraught. Like that video upset me, unnerved me. And someone had told me about Philando Castile, and I was like, y'all make this up? Like I was legit, like I was just not ready.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it still gets me hot. It was like another one. For me personally, I know that could be me. I know that could be any one of us. Yeah. And there's this constant battle, especially at least in my opinion, amongst the black community, where it's just like you have to love yourself that hard, just because so often you're told that like this life can be taken from you and it won't be litigated, and they're good, and you're just and
justifiable.
Yes,
not worth it.
and like if I really succumbed to the images that I saw of myself and that lack of value and that devalue and just not being appreciated, you can't get back up. Yeah. I think a lot of that self-love is understanding that like, and because society tells us we're not individuals, we all act the same way. We do buy into the fact that one, genuinely that can be us, and two, we're not okay until we're all okay. And there's just this like different experience that I feel like other people and other cultures don't necessarily have to bear, because society doesn't see them so monolithically. And I think that's a part of self-love that I want to say is unique to us. I want to go into these spaces and speak my truth, and these spaces don't look like people that look like me. Yeah. And I'm just 100. Like something like I'll like turn the music down and I'll be like, look, so I know I might be like your closest black friend and or only black encounter in like within your week. Let's be 100. Yeah. That being said, I need you to know that what happened affects me. What happened affected all of us. Like that goodness that I make you feel could easily be taken away for no reason. And that's like a real thing. This isn't something that like, oh, it happens so often, maybe they don't think about it or they don't feel it. No. It shakes the community on a regular basis.
Everyone.
And it's one of those things where I remember when the Kavanaugh and the Kwame McDonald thing, and I think they both were being litigated on that Friday, or like the decisions were coming down. And I remember I was like, if Kavanaugh gets off and I don't remember the killer,
Jason Van Dyke.
and if
Van Dyke. Yeah.
I was riots in the street. I was like Chicago. Yes, I was like, it just won't be ready. And that's one of those things that like, I don't think everybody else thinks about self-love in that way.
I felt like it was an affront how people thought that there was going to be violent. Like there was all of this talk about how the police were on standby for
everything closed early.
Yes, everyone.
And despite the fact that everything had been peaceful, you know, and almost all of the protests about all of these police, you know, killings have been peaceful. But I think it called to mind also just how walking with pride and with self-assurance and with self-confidence is a violent act for Black people.
Yes.
You know, and it is seen and perceived as aggressive. And so again, we're encouraging something in a community that could kill them.
Yes.
And we need to understand that as a community, and also understand when people make the choice not to, because being authentic and being loving and caring means also not being judgmental.
Yes.
And so if somebody's choosing to opt out of participating in a community that's under attack, it's unfortunate, it's disappointing, but I cannot put judgments on them based on my experiences. I don't know why they've made those choices. It's not something that I might have around me or choose to be around. But I mean, there's so much going on. Like it's so, you know, we talk about stepping out of the dichotomy. There's gray. There's so much gray.
Yeah. I think even when you were talking about just the different times that you've chosen to buy into the lie, sometimes it's easier to buy into the lie.
God, yeah.
Sometimes there is that comfort. And when you look at, you know, different, you know, people, whether it's famous figures and whatnot, who've kind of decided to go, okay, I'm gonna reject all y'all and I'm gonna go ahead and be, you know, and basically do this. It is this thing where, hey, sometimes it's just tiring. It's like, we were talking about this the other day. I was like, bro, sometimes I'm just like, fam, I just don't feel like being Black right now.
Hello.
You know? And
you get tired of being woke.
Like,
you get tired of being woke.
And you just, and it's just like, that's why sometimes you choose the spaces and the people that you're around. Because you're like, hey, especially if things happen, you're like, I need to go through my natural emotions.
Yeah.
I remember watching, the Van Dyke verdict. I watched it.
I was hyped.
I made sure not to be around certain people. I made sure not I was like because I don't want to go through the emotions I'm going to go through and then have to explain my emotions to you.
Right.
And then have that questioned and then have to go on a historical tangent. And then I'm gonna have to explain everything to you. And then I'm gonna have to tell you why you don't understand and why you reject reality and why and the reason that
why you reject reality.
But for real though, because it is reality. It's not opinion, it's fact. It's reality.
Yeah.
It's real. And I think sometimes it comes to this thing where it's like, well, you need to understand our perspective and our understanding. It's like, no, this is actually the world that we live in.
We've kind of touched base upon it earlier where all Black people, in order for us to be successful, we internalize that we must be exceptional just to be normal, just to be considered like regular, just to be worthy of conversation. You must be Jordan or Jackson. And I think that's an interesting space to navigate, and I'm curious what your feelings are about that.
It's definitely a real thing.
Yes.
I think we as Black people do that. We hold each other to this impossibly high standard. And I think even just thinking about why we do it, I think it's important to understand why, so that when we do it, we know that it's really not coming from a place, it's either coming from a place of the world we live in and the society we live in, placing that upon us, or it comes from a place of us just believing and loving each other so much.
Yeah.
But I do think that I found with myself, more often than not, unfortunately, it comes from a place of a standard of society. So it comes from this place of, oh, I'm looking around the room and seeing who's looking and thinking that's what they're thinking about all of us. You know, it's kind of like when Cardi and Nicki had that fight.
Oh, at the Harper's Bazaar.
And everyone was so upset, right?
Yeah.
But people were like, if that was the BET Awards, y'all wouldn't have cared.
It's true.
But we were upset because it was like, you're embarrassing us
Yeah.
in front of
white people.
all these like high class, like, right? And it's like, this is why we don't get invited. This is why they want to, right? But
That's a real good point.
But we aren't upset because we're like, these are two women who are successful that we love and respect and care about so much that we see as pillars of the community. That's not what it was at all. No. It was like, you're embarrassing us in front of people that we see as gatekeepers.
We're finally allowed to get into the room.
Yeah, and it's like, you're the reason we can't come back, right?
Like, they finally let us in. Now y'all want to act out, and
right?
I do think, like, I mean, it kind of goes like this respectability politics, like this idea that, you know, you can only get in unless you act a certain way, and this way is defined by white people.
Yeah.
So if you don't play according to those rules, I think for a lot of black people, when we maybe throw shade or judge other black people, it's because we're using a rule book that was written by other people. As I've gotten older in my career, I realized that, like, when there are other black people in the room, I get really excited and I'm really happy to have them there. I also think that sometimes it's out of this fear of, like, I want everyone to be safe, and I don't want, like, these conversations to start that happen where no one's in the room, but, you know, people start talking about you, and that's how moves get made against you. But it's just like this tension of not wanting to use a rule book that isn't made for us to succeed, but also wanting to keep you safe and knowing that this rule book, unfortunately, really works in the corporate setting. Like, it was made for them, by them, and it works.
So when you say safe, can you expand on that from a standpoint of like job security or safe?
I would say, so in work, I would say job security.
Yes.
And like, which then leads to like, because for a lot of us, I mean, for a lot of the black people that I work with, like, we are, and this goes like, you know, generational wealth and all these things, but for us, like, we help our families. Like, it's not just money for us, it's money for like our parents, for our sisters, for extended relatives. And so for us, safe is like, I need this check. But I don't want to operate in that space. Like, I don't want to feel grateful to you that you gave me a job, because, you know, some spaces truly act like you
lucky to be here,
right? Yeah. Even though my receipts are just as long as y'all's, you're still gonna treat me like I'm this like charity case.
Playing by those rules is like a myth of safety.
Absolutely.
Too, because the respectability politics, when it the respectability politics, I can say the word, when it intersects with gender,
yes,
it gets really problematic for black women and for women, because we protect, in order to protect this image of, you know, we're good, we can be in the room. We're doing it on the backs of black women who are being assaulted by black men, who are being, and it just gets really dangerous. And so we're trying to hold on to this idea that, like, there's an acceptable or a right way to be, and not realizing that it's hurting us.
Yeah.
We essentially are conforming to something that is killing us.
Yeah.
And like we're conforming to something that really isn't meant for us, because and I think that becomes this hard question of when and how do we stand up to society and say the rules have to be different, but when we stand up to society and the rules being different, we literally either get taken out of the spaces that we're in, we get
for taking a knee,
we get killed, we get blackballed, we get banished, and so we're basically, it's one of those things where it's like, hey, we all have this wink of like, hey, we understand how we should act and how we really are, but we know our society's not there yet.
Yeah, the system doesn't serve us.
The
Constitution was not written with women and people of color in mind.
No, it wasn't.
Like,
it
just
wasn't
point blank period.
No.
And knowing that we still, to this day, have to live by those rules, and there's people put in place high up in the government that are here to make sure that we don't let go of that, because they know that inherently it's not designed for everybody to win. Yeah. So as long as we stay super, super true to that, like, folks are gonna take L's.
Yeah.
And that false narrative is just something that I think is very American, that we like also need to have like another completely different conversation about.
Very true.
But like, it's not designed for everybody to win. And until it is, we'll just continue to hold ourselves back from it and until it is, we as a country will continue to stunt our potential. We could live up to the ideals if we allowed ourselves to, but that's not what everybody wants.
Is there any sort of way for us to take a collective kind of idea of, hey, let's just not play by this rule book, all of us together, and see what happens? But then it's like, shoot, like,
that's economic to me.
you know what I mean?
I was like supporting Black businesses.
Yeah.
How you know, for me at least, like in the position that I'm in, I really try to make an effort to support Black people. So whether it's donating or just like services, like if there's a service, I'm really going to think of a Black woman first, quite frankly, and then I'm going to think of a Black man or a person of color, because I think, money is real.
It matters.
And we have to acknowledge that, for some of us, in the way that, where we are in society, we aren't able to necessarily be out there and be social justice activists, but I still think that supporting them, whether it's through money or time or resources, is very valuable.
Earlier we had a conversation, real quick, about how Jeff Bezos pulled out of opening up that second headquarters in New York. And that real thing, they said it was about local politicians. I don't think that was the case. The New York Inquirer was running that story that was talking about this like lurid photos and him doing something. We don't got it.
He was sending
And based out of his personal life, he made $1 billion decision and was like, nah, I'm good. And just think if Laquan McDonald happened and Van Dyke didn't get indicted, or let's say whoever our Black Jeff Bezos would be didn't like the ruling, he'd be like, well, I'm gonna pull my headquarters out of Chicago. Y'all can fix it later. Y'all can deal with this. Like he made moves based upon his like private personal life that didn't really kill nobody. If we had enough, what's the word I'm looking for? Agency. If we had wealth that made decisions like that happen for us, I think that could just really change the game. And that's just not the position that we're in.
Which is intentional, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Because if that was the case, then
things would get done.
Things would get done. Things would be different.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We have this collective belief that we have to, when we gain, it's because somebody else has lost, and we don't teach anybody about mutual empowerment. We don't teach people about like mutual gain. And when I think about how I want to impact people emotionally and impact adolescents and kids, and that's where I come. And I talk to girls all the time about sexual health, sexual decision making, but that's a fraction of the conversation that needs to happen, because the majority of it needs to happen to boys about like gaining consent. You can gain in
Real
power.
talk.
You can gain in power and feel powerful in a relationship without subjugating your partner.
Yes.
But they're not taught that.
I think it's almost impossible to really grow and mature fully solely on your own, because everyone has blind spots.
Yes.
Everyone has some level of, you can be the most self-aware and still lack some sort of self-awareness, and that's only able to be seen with true relationship with someone else.
And it's smoke and mirrors to say, I've gotten here on my own. Nobody helped me.
Yes.
Right?
There's no such thing as a self-made.
I don't like that game.
There's no such thing as a self-made anything.
Yeah, there's a squad.
I wouldn't want to be self-made. I am somebody who has had women pour into me my entire life, their knowledge, their expertise, and their wisdom. And if I had just grown up in a vacuum, I wouldn't have any of that.
So to pivot away from the way we can view our relationships, not necessarily in a negative context, but from a accountability context, in a way, the expectation that we set upon Black folks, I think it's really important, and I'm also curious to see how you guys feel about how the relationships we seek out can make us better.
I feel like we tend to seek out friendships that'll make us better, but we don't seek out romantic relationships that'll make us better.
Sorry.
Real talk.
You know what I mean? Like, so it's easy. Like, I'm like, I love I love Anthony. He inspires me. He's killing it. He's doing these great things. He's motivating. He challenges me. He hits me up 4 a.m. Why aren't you at the gym? Blah blah blah. I love being friends with him. But when it comes to like a relationship, yo, I can't believe my girl. She's saying, how come I didn't respond back to this job? How come I didn't do this? And it's just like, wait, like, you know.
It's the same kind of love. It's the same kind of love.
You know what I mean? And so I find that as guys, we love, you know, friendships that'll push us. But with a romantic relationship, we want this like mythological, like easy creature that just acquiesces to everything and praises the ground that we walk on. So I mean,
but see, so and also in conjunction with that, I think that plays a major role, not just in self-love, but I mean the majority, just in like self-actualization. Like my whole thing is, I feel like. This might be a reach. Let me reel this. That's
why I had to clarify. That's why I clarified not all guys, because all you need is 20 seconds to like, he's killing men. I think he hates all men.
Folks be getting their feelings hurt.
Yeah.
I think like I genuinely believe no woman's purpose is solely just to prop up a man. Like that's just not the way. That's just not the narrative.
Ridiculous.
But far too often, especially historically, that's been the case.
Yeah,
and even in some cases right now, in certain countries, and like that's just not what success looks like. Like real success, if we're going to be really, really honest about it, that's just not what it is. And that narrative, and I mean, we both feel really strongly about that. That's not even an option. It's not even a maybe. Yet it's still so prevalent.
Yeah.
So I think changing that conversation, changing the way we view our relationships and being challenged even at home in a way that makes us better is something that's invaluable.
Yeah.
And I think you both kind of said this, I'm not sure that most men want that type of relationship, because that really requires letting go of a lot of ego. I also think as a Black woman, we get saddled with a lot of stuff. Like again, it goes back to the corporate setting. Like I'm just telling you how things are, but because of the way the society characterizes Black women, it's I'm being negative, or I'm not I'm not supporting you, or I'm not all these things. So I think I can only speak as from my experience as a Black woman. I think it can be particularly difficult because historically Black women have carried not only ourselves, but like whole population.
Yes.
And we don't necessarily get the opportunity to be in relationships because either we're seen as, well, you're just gonna handle all this and I'm just gonna like fall back, or if I do that because that's how I've been taught to handle myself, that's not attractive to you, right? I don't wanna be with someone that's self-sufficient or successful that might eclipse me, because that's just not what I'm on right now.
So this is one of those things where I think self-love is really, really important, just because the way we see ourselves and the way we feel about ourselves makes sure that we aren't threatened by anybody else. And when you're not threatened by anybody else, you want to build them up, you want to prop them up. You see, that's not a fearful situation for you.
Yeah.
And I think the majority of people's inability to love themselves is a major setback to everyone's progress.
Yeah.
And I think if we can really be transparent, be honest, be open to having such conversations, I think it would make a world of change. But so many people are still on this like old shit.
We're cumulative, what's the word I'm trying to use? Like we are our cumulative experiences.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So when we come into a relationship with a man, a woman, man, woman, like, so if you haven't come to terms with your experiences, you cannot live authentically.
Right.
And then you are shaping, shifting what you communicate, what you say, and you're not connecting authentically.
Yeah.
And so many people maybe don't talk about a certain part of their lives because they don't feel like that'll make them look well, or that'll make them look good in a certain light. And then you're hiding things and you just can't connect. And then some people try to hide things because they know their partner doesn't like that they maybe had a same-sex relationship or maybe used drugs in the past, and they're hiding who they are, and then they get found out, then there's so when I think of healing in this context, I think of, authentically coming to a sense of this is who I am, this is what I did. I'm not going to walk in shame about it. This is what and it's certainly not going to dictate who I am and what I do today.
Yeah.
And if this person has a problem with it, then that's not meant to be. We're constantly trying to fit like square pegs in round holes, and not hearing like, no, if this is who I am and that person, it's not palatable to that person, then that is not who I need to be with.
Period.
Something that I had to learn.
That's
Period.
That I really had to learn that just from past relationships, and just like, I think especially as women, we're taught that like you're successful if you're in a relationship. You're even more successful if you're married.
Yeah.
And I think
I've never heard that. No, I'm just kidding.
She said, I've never heard that.
That in mind,
I literally was like, what?
you make yourself smaller. There were so many relationships where I'm like, I know this is not what he wants to hear. I know he's not going to like that. Like, as you can tell, I'm like very animated. I can be very loud, whatever. And I'm just like kind of a free spirit. And I think for me, a lot of the guys that I was with did not appreciate that. And I clocked it. And instead of being like, that's not for me, like round hole, square peg, see ya. I was like, well, maybe I can shave parts of myself off to fit that hole, you know, and make myself more palatable for you. And on one hand, you're being self-aware that like someone's not for you, but for the wrong reasons to appease. And I feel like I really had to get to the point now where it's like, this is who I am. And I may not be in a relationship now or next year, but like I'm really okay because I can't sacrifice me for that relationship.
No, ever.
Not, and it's just, I'm telling you, it's so difficult when you're told, like, why aren't you in a relationship?
And there is nothing worse than feeling lonely when you're with somebody.
Y'all just,
Being alone all day, the worst feeling is being in a relationship and feeling alone.
Yeah.
The reality is you look at the healthiest relationships, whether it's friendships, like a romantic relationship, a business relationship, the healthiest relationships grow. Healthy things grow, plain and simple. So if it's healthy, it grows. So if you're in a relationship and you're not growing and the other person's not growing, then it's not healthy because it's dying. You know, and I think that's what we have to look at with relationships is this actually growing? Are we growing each other? And growth is never easy. Growth is never comfortable. It's never simple. Think about like your body. Puberty is like the weirdest, craziest time of your life.
Good point.
But it's growth, and it's arguably the most important growth that you have in those early. You formed so many things are formed in that time. But if you're like, nah, fam, I don't want to go through that weird part. You're just gonna be like a baby forever, which is awkward. You're gonna be like,
I see what you did with that now.
You know what I mean? Like, you're just gonna be like a baby forever. But that's the thing. We have people in relationships that are infants, and they're mental, emotional, spiritual infants because they're in relationships where they're allowed to stay the same, and we've told ourselves it was healthy.
How can self-love and self-hate manifest itself in our professional lives?
You know, it's a topic when we talk about like salary and women, right? Like, you know, the energy that women go into when they're negotiating is different. And so really kind of sitting and deciding like what you're worth directly correlates to what you'll ask for in the workplace.
Yes. For me, just in my corporate experience, it's been really interesting to see how race and diversity plays out, because I thought it was much more it is complex, but I thought it was going to be much more nuanced than it really is. It's very much a numbers game.
Like a quota.
Yeah, exactly.
Diversity is quota.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and it's like super hot right now. So it's really hard to gauge because it's like in.
Yeah.
So it's like in to talk about. So people are like, so if you pitch like a commercial for like an ad agency, they're like, oh yeah, like let's get a black family. Oh, we love it. And you're like, oh yeah, great. Like we're all winning. It's like, no, we're just a wave.
Yeah.
But like 2 years from now, when it's not hot anymore, is that still going to be a thing where it's like, yeah, we value diversity. Like diversity is really only valuable because it's translating. I'm like,
it's a buzzword. It's a buzzword.
Yeah. It's in, it's sexy. Like Black Panther did really well, so people are like, let's do it.
I think self-hate can look like sabotaging other black people, or thinking that there can only be one. Because you bought into that narrative that like, well, I'm the special one, and there can only be one.
Yeah.
Come up in here and take
No,
my
but
spot.
real talk. That is the way that works.
Like,
That's true.
There can only be one, and because I'm the special one, and because I've allowed myself to think that I'm not replaceable, there are plenty of talented black people, and you know, you coming into my space.
Yes, we are pit against each other.
That is and like I didn't really understand that until I think I got to like college, law school. Like that is where you just really see like the numbers are dwindling. This like deficit mindset really comes out because everyone's told like you 10 or whatever are special, and then you just start seeing elbows and people just really
making
push
space
themselves all the way. And if you think about it, it's like, okay, but how can there only be space for one and this whole boardroom is filled with 25 white men? So they find space for them.
Yeah.
There's got to be space for all of us. And it's actually crucial that we bring other people into the fold. And because like if you only have one, you're never really gonna make waves.
No.
You're never gonna make change.
No,
if there's
that's just
only
still
one.
quota checking.
So we really have to think about,
Yeah.
are we defining the way we feel we're successful based on these markers that are external to us, or is there some sort of metric that we're using for ourselves that's internally driven that is going to be that success? Because when it's external, I feel like that's when you have these like kind of mental health crisis and these like this dissonance. And when you have an internal marker of what feels successful, then I think you can start to have some congruence with your mental wellness, your relationships, and all of that. What's your guide, right? Because it can't be these things in the world. Like if it lines up and it makes you successful, then like that's something that is a lucky thing. That's something that struck for you.
Yes.
But just because somebody is getting an award on a television show because of their path doesn't mean that they have any more value or success than you do if you feel successful.
Say that. As people of color, do you ever think we view success as a place that we get to where we don't have to deal with racism?
Oh God, you see it all the time.
Because I feel I've heard a lot of people kind of look at like rich people and be like, man, that's the kind of money you ain't gotta worry about racism. That's the kind of success you ain't get. So sometimes I think we work and toil to achieve this mythical like
of like equality,
a place
like hey, equality.
of where we're like, bro, I'm so rich. Nobody's racist.
So rich,
racism's gone. And then I think like, do you think we think that's the thing?
I personally don't. Just because that whole, even if you in a Benz, you saw a nigga in the coupe.
It's
like it's
real.
It's a
real.
super fact. And you've seen what's happened to like other rich black folks that like cross the race line, and then it's a real thing. And then all of a sudden they get pulled right back. No, that's not the way. No.
It's an abusive relationship that we're in, right? And so when I think about, a male-female, like when a woman's being abused, like you don't like you're trying to preserve the relationship without any of the abuse. Like, so people say like, why do women stay? It's like, well, they like this relationship, they love this person, but they just don't want to be hurt, right? And so when I think about other ways that manifests, it's like we like this relationship. I like being that I'm able to be at the table. Right. So I don't want to say anything to mess that up. And so then you say, well, I really, what about these police shootings though? And then people go, oh God, and like, oh no, you're not invited. And so all of a sudden because of something
didn't know you were that kind of black.
Right. Because of something you've said, you've disrupted that relationship, and now you're like skittish and trying to get back in the good books. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to like belabor the analogy, but like I just see that as this, you're constantly working to preserve this relationship that is abusive to you. Yeah. And then so what are you slowly giving up?
I think, and we've all, I feel, have done a really good job at like reflecting on what the world tells us we can be, and then us choosing to decide what we're going to be.
Yeah.
And not to say that that's not still an active practice all the time.
Yeah.
I'm much more in love and much more convinced that I have the autonomy to create my best self instead of listening to this version of self that's being placed upon me.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of it does fall on, I think a lot of it falls on us to be cognizant of how these things were all created. Because even when you're talking, all these things, these are all these are all cultural things that have been purposely created for us to be a certain way. And I think it's important for us to be super cognizant of it, but then be super like to be super graceful and be super willing to engage with all of us on these things. And then we were talking about the whole like idea of like, if you were raised around white people, around black people, like it's like we don't come together or have that understanding and that talk with each other. And I think really being on this thing of like trying to uplift and empower each other, not from a place of, hey, I'm looking at what you're doing wrong and how you can't make it in the world that we're in, and here's how, but really just being like, hey man, do you understand where this cultural mindset that we have comes from? Do you understand how it's not set up for our success? Do you understand how this is not healthy? Now let's move forward and let's be on the same page.
I think for me, it's like, I'm just team do you. In the sense that like, I just really want Black people to be able to create a life for themselves that is fulfilling to them. Like, we don't all need to or even should be in a corporate setting. Some of us should absolutely have our own businesses and provide amazing services and goods that service the community and other people. And so I know I think I was, saying a lot like corporate America, and that's what I have been in. But I want it to be for all Black people, just create a life and a success that feels good to you.
Yeah. I want us to read and like share in what we're reading. Like in my mind I'm like visualizing this like utopian book club of like and I just remember this like I was doing something in my office one time and I have books on my desk and somebody was walking by and where I work, like many places, faculty is white, support staff and is Black, right? And so somebody was coming by and cleaning, changing the trash cans, and he sees a book on my desk, and we just started having a conversation because it was like Michelle Alexander, and I had like The Other Westmore, and then this other one about like mass incarceration and parenthood. And we just started talking about that, and he was like, yeah, I read that, but I didn't read that other thing. Did you read this other book? And so we were just kind of sharing ideas and like when we read the text, our different perspectives and what we thought. And it was such a human connection that I feel like it's those types of conversations and those types of connections and just discourses around shared texts and topics that can just help us bridge whatever gaps have been manufactured for us.
Yeah.
And
That's very true.
so that's as you were talking
Gaps
about.
that are manufactured, that's real.
Facts. I mean, yes, I love
So
that.
true.
But I mean, yeah.
We
Communication. Like, this
see what
real
happens
coming
when folks
togetherness.
stop reading.
Yeah,
You
facts.
see what happens when people stop reading, like 100%.
Yeah, but it's real togetherness. Yeah, that was great. That was super comprehensive. I really appreciate you guys. I mean, super comprehensive. We covered the bases. I appreciate y'all coming out and being a part of this. I really hope the viewer was able to take away something positive. I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Yeah.